Welcome back to all of our podcast listeners. This week, I am joined by fully accredited play therapist, Gráinne Warren, who is neurodivergent, just like myself. And this week's podcast is going to focus on autistic lived experience and, I suppose, more particularly, a late in life identification. So to give you a little bit more information about Gráinne, I'm going to hand over to the lady herself. So Gráinne, would you like to tell our listeners a little bit more about yourself professionally and personally? And we'll get into a little bit later then all about, I suppose, a late in life identification. And we'll talk more, I suppose, in detail about it then. So thank you so much for being here. I'm delighted to have you.
Thank you so much for asking me to come on. It's lovely. My first podcast.
Yay!
Yeah, so as you said, I'm an accredited play therapist. I do a lot, actually. It's a bit, all over the place. The core aspect of my business is that I'm a play therapist and I do a lot of kind of parent support consultation work. I'm also training in the middle of training to be a creative clinical supervisor. So I'm just kind of taking up my hours for that as well. And then another huge aspect of my business is that I do a lot of like neurodivergent wellbeing support and consultancy as well. So I run Mind and Me workshops, group workshops for autistic ADHD adults. Wow. And from that, I've written a Mind and Me wellbeing workbook. And then I also I'm in the middle of always doing everything, in the middle of creating different resources as well. I've written something about supporting authentic social connection, as kind of an alternative to social skills, which
love that already as a concept. I will definitely be downloading and purchasing that. That's incredible.
Yeah, so just bits and pieces like that. Can
I ask you, what led you into deciding that you wanted to be a play therapist? Was there something innately that really drew you to it, or what was it? Or if you can remember?
Do you know what? Nothing really drew it. It was just impulsive and random, I suppose. I was working as an SNA for 15 years. And I absolutely loved it. And I just loved children. It was just fantastic. Got a fantastic job.
So meaningful.
Oh, so meaningful. And the connection I loved connecting with them. And then I was made redundant and I didn't know what I was going to do. And then someone said to me, you'd make a great play therapist. And I never even heard of a play therapist before. So I obviously researched it and I said, I'll try that. And I did, and that's why I'm here, and I love it. Absolutely love it.
Sometimes it's serendipitous, isn't it? Where one door closes, another opens, and it's nearly like the suggestion of another person. That's why I feel like I am like neurodivergently or autistically. It's where someone gives that tilt, that monotropic lens, tilts the lens for me, and I just go, actually, that's a fantastic idea. Thank you for that suggestion. But it just shows that person saw that real connection within you to connect with other people and to support them.
Yeah, definitely like that. You can't suggest anything to me, and I will go off. And research it and do it. And
do you know what I love about your social media? Because again, definitely make sure you're following Gráinne on Instagram. She's Gráinne Warren. I'm going to say underscore is the correct way to say this. _ play therapy on Instagram. And you have the most incredible, insightful posts. I know you're popping them up every day. But what I love about it, they're very exciting. If you ever see anything I do on social media, it's very rainbow. Same like my office here. But I love that it's very easy to read. The way you have a visual mind. It's just so easy to read, but so much like perfection in the insight and the way you give just the right amount of information that you can take it away and process it. That's why I really can't wait to read your new workbook as well. I'll be like, I'm definitely downloading that.
I'm always worried that I'm info dumping on a post. I mean, so I can't make info dump on that.
No, but I feel like it's for me, because I get really overwhelmed by too much text, but I love the way that you've done it. And even the background colours are just I need to take a lesson from that myself, because all of my colours are so strong on my resources. But I just think it's really easy to read, but it's just so factual. And because you're a neurodivergent person yourself, I feel like it's an instant connection, because I can nearly see through your eyes when you're like creating the resource or the information, why you feel that way, because it's innately within all of us, I suppose, as neurodivergent people. We have those, even though they're different, but they're still technically those shared experiences.
Yeah. No, that's fantastic. Thank you.
Okay, so the way that you understand yourself now as an autistic adult, can you look back in any kind of way over your life and see different moments in your life where you can understand that maybe potentially others misunderstood you because you're actually, and clearly were, autistic, or I would say autistic. Is it okay to say autistic ADHD? Is that the way you would say it? Yeah. So as an autistic ADHD person, would you feel like if you could look back over moments in your life, do you think was there moments where maybe you were misunderstood or maybe judged incorrectly, and looking back now you understood that in that moment where maybe you had, I would call it a tricky moment, that actually that you were a child or a teen or a young person that was actually, I suppose, in a moment of confusion or maybe misunderstood yourself what was happening? Can you look back and see moments like that in your life, do you think?
Oh, it's so many.
And do you feel like you have like so much compassion for yourself now? How do you feel, or is that okay to ask?
Yeah, no, absolutely. I think self-compassion for me, that has been the key for absolutely everything, because there's so much shame, involved.
Yeah.
Yeah, and like we collect all the shame. So
Yeah,
it's like
we do.
until we have a really good idea of like who we are, like that's when the self-compassion piece can come in and you can just melt that shame away.
And do you feel like now that you understand that you're autistic ADHD, do you feel like you're kind of, what for me anyway, and might be just the enigma that I am, that I do this, but I feel like it's not that I sit down and I'm like, now I need to ponder about what happened when I was 11. But sometimes I think about, just randomly, it's probably when I see my kids doing things, I'm like, oh God, if that was me back in the day, people that didn't know me might have misjudged me for that. But I'm so glad that I'm my gorgeous kid's mom, because I can be like, oh, that's okay, my lovely Jack, or that's okay, my beautiful Max, or my lovely Connor. Do you feel like you ever have moments like that?
Yeah, like there's one moment in particular that I can remember when I was maybe in transition year. I'm assuming, again, I have like a very non-linear understanding.
Yeah, same.
Oh my, it's really, really
Jumps.
hard to pinpoint. Yeah. So I think it was obviously must have been in transition year, because it was like a trip away, the class with the year. And we spent a week kind of in an activity centre. I can't even remember what it was called or anything like that. And sure, I was loving it. It was great crack, and I was there with my friends. But I remember one evening, I just ended up hiding in the bedroom and crying and crying and crying. Like the whole evening, I was completely overwhelmed. I didn't know what was wrong. So my friends came into the room and they were like, what's wrong? Do you know what happened? And I couldn't tell them because I didn't even have like the words to describe what was going on. And it's only like maybe even last year that I thought back on it, and I was like, I was completely overwhelmed. Like, yeah, I was having fun and I was having a crack with my friends, but I was having I didn't have any opportunity to like step back away from people and go back into my little bubble to like recharge myself again. So it was just like a snap moment where I just completely broke down.
It's where nearly the mask came off and you couldn't hold it in anymore, do you feel like?
Yeah, but I didn't even know that it was happening until it was happening.
Yeah.
So that's kind of like a big kind of like standout moment that I do remember. And I think generally, like in school especially, like I always thought I was stupid. Like I remember my peers and stuff like kind of like commenting on me being slow,
oh my gosh,
not getting stuff. And it literally was just, I think because the reason I probably don't have many childhood memories is because I was in a constant state of like disassociation. So I literally switched off from myself in order to survive from probably being like understimulated, because I need a lot of mental stimulation, but then also being like overstimulated by like all the sensory information.
Yeah. It's like a battle.
Yeah. So constant state of disassociation. And then I suppose like just a vagueness of like social, cues and languages and stuff like that I was missing. So I did definitely internalize that message that I was like stupid and ditzy and slow.
And do you feel like, I know maybe this is incorrect to say, but do you feel like as a play therapist, you nearly support yourself through that kind of processing of what actually occurred, or is that even possible?
No, it is. And I think this is so important for other kind of play therapists to understand as well, or maybe it's just with me. But there's definitely a dual process going on, in my work, because I'm doing it, obviously, I'm doing it because I'm really passionate about supporting other neurodivergent children and families. Sure. And at the same time, I'm also healing my own little...
I really get that,
Yeah. So it's fabulous.
Well, that is amazing. And thank you for sharing that with me, because I know myself, it can be triggering to relive those as vividly as you probably do, reliving those moments and those kind of unkind words that were said to you. But also, I'm really proud that you got through all of that you've got through, and you're here on this podcast talking to me. So thank you for being here with me today, as I often say. Okay, I'm going to look to the next question. I suppose this probably may be more relevant more than anything, because I know we may just have many, I suppose, potentially autistic or other types of, I suppose, neurodivergent individuals listening in on this podcast, wondering, could they possibly be autistic, or, wondering. I suppose the question that I have here for number 2 is, I suppose, at what point did you realise you were autistic and ADHD, and how did that realisation shape your understanding of yourself? So was there a point in time where you were like, I actually think I'm neurodivergent?
I always thought I was a little bit autistic, in inverted commas.
just a touch.
Yeah, because I just didn't get people. I mean, like, I was so bored by like all this, like, surface level small talk, and I wanted to deep dive into stuff, and I didn't really understand a lot of kind of like just the social norms, that like going to parties and having like parent meetups and all that kind of stuff. Just didn't get it. So I always kind of felt that I was a little bit autistic that way, not knowing of course, at that stage, not knowing at all what it was actually, what it means to be autistic. And I'm after losing my train of thought. But yeah.
I suppose it's where we're looking at, when did you come to a point where you thought, okay, I think I'm going to go for an assessment? Or did you ever get to that point?
I did. And it's probably like a lot of other, late identified adults, my kids.
Yeah.
So my son, who is like my middle child, I always knew he was autistic. I mean, he struggled massively with dysregulation since he was born. So he had colic, again, inverted commas.
I know that word well. It gives me the terrors.
I know. It wasn't colic, it was dysregulation. And I remember then when he was like maybe about 5 or 6, I brought him for an autism assessment. And they basically laughed at me. And they were like, don't be ridiculous. He's so friendly. Look at the way he looks at you, and he's smiling, he's making eye contact. He couldn't be autistic. And then they misdiagnosed him with having a borderline intellectual disability.
Oh my goodness. That's a big misdiagnosis, really, like, isn't it really?
Massive.
The way you might support him might be a little bit different because of that misdiagnosis.
Yeah, I found that quite traumatic because, number one, it didn't align with what I felt
to be.
Yeah, exactly. And it just didn't make sense. So like, we changed schools for him. He went to a special school. And then when he was a bit older, I was like, no, this is ridiculous. He's definitely neurodivergent. So I went to the wonderful Childversity in Kildare, who are absolutely
fantastic.
So neuroaffirming. And they, correctly identified him as autistic. And that was fine. And then my youngest daughter, it was when she was like, oh God, it didn't even occur to me for so long. But when the older she got, the more anxious she got, and the more withdrawn she started becoming. And I think that I could like recognize something about myself in her. Mm-hmm. And then I was like, do you know what? I might actually like explore the idea, is she autistic as well? And then when we were doing that assessment, the psychologist was obviously chatting to me about my daughter, and everything she said, I was like, but yeah, we all do that. It's normal.
But it is normal, but it also means that you are autistic as well.
Exactly. And then it just kind of like hit me, okay, even though I already knew that I was autistic, that was the piece that I was like, no, I'm definitely autistic. So I went away and I was self-identifying as autistic. And at the same time, I was working as a play therapist, working with a lot of autistic families. So I was self-identifying as autistic. So I think it's really important to just like be open and normalize that for families.
For sure. Yeah, exactly. You don't need to rush off to get the diagnosis unless it's something that you really want. And I would have self-identified for a long time, but I found that, do you feel like, because I was so steeped in the research, like even my office is covered in books and resources all to do with autism. This might sound like silly, but I felt like I couldn't trust my own belief in myself that I was autistic, so I needed someone external. But I was still ultimately autistic, whether someone had told me I was or not, because I understood myself, if that makes sense.
Yeah, like I definitely knew I was autistic. I wasn't doubting that, but I think because of my work and because I was identifying as autistic, I wanted to make sure to back that up as well, just in case. Yeah, just in case. It's just like, I don't know. I just felt more secure having that like official identification rather than just saying it.
Do you feel it is a little bit like this? How I felt about it was because I felt I could never trust my own mind, because everyone was telling me I was wrong, or not about being autistic, but like over the course of my life, not everyone, but many people would have said, oh, you got this wrong, or oh no, why did you say it like that? Or oh God, there's many things that I would have, inverted commas, done wrong socially. So I was like, you can't trust your own thoughts. So therefore you might think you're autistic, but maybe you're just making it up because you'd like to be known as autistic. And I was like, why would I like make up a thing? And then I was battling with my own mind. I thought, just go for an assessment and come what may, at least either way you'll have clarity then, and then you'll either know that you can trust your own opinion of yourself, or you'll find out you can't. And what I actually found from that more than anything is that I felt like, okay, I can trust my own voice in my mind, that, well, visual imagery in my mind, that I am autistic. That's what do you feel it helped you in any way, having that confirmation?
I mean, like, I think you just explained what every single autistic person and all the autistic children that come to see me experience, and that's the invalidation of their lived experiences.
Yeah,
constantly being invalidated. So obviously that's going to like fragment your sense of self, and you're going to lose that sense of self and like knowing who you are. Yeah. So there's definitely an element of that to it. It was really funny because talking to the psychologist about it, we were in a dark room, and after about 2 minutes I was gone. Flatline, brain was gone. I was totally after disassociation again.
Too much, or not enough stimulation, I suppose.
Not enough stimulation. You have a light in my room here because it's actually quite dark. I had to have a light on to keep my brain awake. And it was at the end of the assessment, she said, well, Gráinne, you're definitely autistic, but as much as you are autistic, you have a really, really strong ADHD profile. And I was like, what? I had absolutely no clue at all. It completely blindsided me. And when I was telling my friends afterwards, like, I got quite a bit of pushback from a few of my friends who are neurodivergent, you know, so there's a lot of like that internal going on.
Yeah,
but
ableism,
yeah, you're definitely not autistic. Like, there's nothing wrong with you. Why would you pay someone?
Well, I remember actually when I told everyone on my, so it was, I think it was, I can't remember what year it was, a good few years ago now when I said it on my social media. And one person actually wrote on, they'd known me personally, say, would have not essentially grown up with me, but I've known them about 20 years almost as an adult. And they wrote on my post, you can't be autistic. You are nothing like your son, Connor. So my eldest son, Connor, would have high support needs, intellectual disability, non-speaking autistic. And I just remember thinking, I haven't heard from this individual for 15 years, would say minimum. And this is the time they chose to communicate with me, is to tell me I was lying. Why would I say publicly something about myself?
But isn't it fascinating? Like how are we activating these people? What is it?
That made me really sad as well, because I thought, why? What? But do you know what? I reflected, I suppose I was still traumatized from, I suppose, a whole life of not being identified. I looked inward at myself and I was like, what about you makes this lady think you would lie? Like, what is it about you? And then afterwards I was like, I said it to my husband and he was saying, or what is it about the lady? Why do you blame yourself instantly as opposed to, and I'm not saying I should be blaming anyone for anything, but I instantly go, Amanda, why? Like, what's wrong with you that everyone thinks you're lying? Like, yeah, and it made me really sad. And I suppose I can look back now years later and go, okay, I don't say I laugh at myself, but I kind of go, God, I'm such an idiot. I was blaming myself without even thinking for a second it could possibly, if you think of double empathy theory, that perhaps there's a mismatch of like understanding of each other's perspective here, as opposed to Amanda's instantly wrong all of the time, if that makes sense.
Yeah, but again, doesn't that go back down to, like, you know, one of our kids being constantly invalidated?
Invalidated. Like, it's an immediate reaction nearly. She'd be like, oh, why can't you just do, yeah, for sure. Okay, I'm going to go.
But then I had like other friends, I had a few friends who were like, what, you're autistic? I never would have thought you were autistic. And I was like, yeah, and I'm ADHD as well. And they were like, well, yeah, obviously you're ADHD.
You're like, and by that you mean?
But yeah.
Oh God! Well, I'm glad you had some positives from telling people. I think because I suppose in my home life, I'm always here in the house, as I say, my gorgeous buttons. I'm always at home with the kids because I suppose our childcare is only myself, my husband, or my mother-in-law. So we have no other childcare. So I'm not really like a social butterfly, or I don't really do a lot of anything other than, not shockingly, study autism or autism-related topics, or I'm with my kids, or design graphics because it gives me joy. But I suppose outside of that, there was nobody else I really had to tell. So the only way I could tell everyone was just to put it on my social media, because that's where I suppose I've met a lot of friends through my social media, but that's how I told people. So I was very lucky that it was very positive, except for one or two kind of not so positive comments. But did you feel like after you were identified as autistic that you had, because for me, I felt like it was like suddenly, okay, you're autistic. And I'm like, at last, it all makes sense. And it did all make sense. And I could start that process of like reflecting back. But then also in the immediate aftermath, did you feel like you needed, or that you even had available to you, like a support system that, because you nearly need to like verbalize, but does that mean then all the times X, Y, and Z, or like, did you have any of that kind of opportunity, or did you even need that afterwards?
I don't think I needed it. I think I'm just so lucky that I'm doing the work that I do, because I've surrounded myself with like neurodivergent community.
Yes, literally,
yeah. So it's been like, again, it's been like a dual process. It's been super supportive of me being autistic, and then surrounding myself with other people who are like, you know, just starting their journey, discovering that themselves. So yeah, no, not really any support that way.
What I felt like was, once I started drawing, you know, the little character I draw, it's probably not this video, it's kind of behind my head there in the corner, Autie, when I started drawing Autie, I felt like, for me anyway, not that it was like a support mechanism, but by reading the comments of all of the incredible autistic community that would comment on posts I put up or videos I put up, I found that really therapeutic, which might sound very strange, but people saying, yeah, that's my experience too, or X, I'm like, okay, it's like you feel seen, even though it was just something I wanted to draw. And it's like,
putting your experience onto something, it's much, much easier.
Yeah, it's not interesting.
Yeah,
I suppose it feels a little safer as well, doesn't it? And like, even though, you know, people on social media probably have like potentially like a strategy of why they do the things they do, I'm definitely, I would say ADHD, I've just not gone for an assessment yet, but I don't have a strategy. I just like, if I feel like drawing something, I'll draw it and put it up. And if I feel like putting up a video, I just very authentic that way, in that I can't, like I was saying to you earlier, I wouldn't use a note or a script on a presentation or anything. I can't, because my mind moves too fast. I wouldn't have the capacity. But I definitely found, for me personally, it was really supportive, or still is very supportive for me. I feel it's nearly like therapy in a sense, reading everyone's comments, watching the battles sometimes that happen in the comments. And then if it gets to a level where it's not kind to the autistic community, obviously remove those people that are not being helpful in their commenting. But I like a discussion on it, if that makes sense. But I find for me in that regard, it was helpful. Can I ask you then, in relation to masking, and I'm always very careful with masking, because I never want to trigger anyone's trauma. If you're happy to talk about it, do you feel like that when you were growing up, like, I suppose you kind of did answer that in a way of when you were away on that excursion, but if you can think back at all, do you feel like you were high masking at different times, if you feel like you were, or would you do it now still? Or what do you think about the whole topic of masking?
It's just so complex, isn't it?
Yeah, we have it is multi-layered.
We don't even realise that we're doing since we're very, very small. But I suppose when I was younger, and I think it was the more I was going through the school system, the more I masked, because I was a very goofy, impulsive, weird little kid, that just started suppressing that, the more reactions I kind of got from it. And it's really funny, something that happened to me a few years ago in a shopping centre, and I think it's the perfect analogy for like that part of masking for me, is I was going into the shopping centre, and next thing a song popped up, in the intercom, and it was Weezer's Island in the Sun. And I was like, oh yeah, I love this song. And they have played like Nirvana and stuff in that shopping centre. I'm like, I love whoever is picking music for this place. It's great. So I was walking through the shopping centre, and I was bopping away to the song, and I was singing away, and I was like full of joy, loving it. And then people were giving me like really strange looks. And I was like, okay. So I kind of like just stopped singing. I was like, maybe I'm just like, being a little bit too enthusiastic about this.
I would have loved it if I saw it. I probably joined in the chorus.
Walking around like bopping away to it, kind of in my own little head, but people were still looking at me kind of strangely. And I was like, right. So I totally masked up and just, walked through normally. People were still looking at me strange. And then I realised that music was not coming from the intercom, it was coming from my handbag. I was accidentally pressing my Spotify, but that was supposed to my ADHD did not even notice that it wasn't coming from the intercom.
Sorry.
I was responding in my authentic joy to this thing that I thought was happening around me that wasn't actually happening around me. That was people's response to it. So
which is sad. Yeah, but it was funny, the piece where you were like, because you know what it reminded me of, as you were saying it there, you realised it was coming from your radio. Do you remember the Brady Bunch? I'm much older than you.
Oh my God, I love the Brady Bunch. So
do you remember there was like a film of it then, and they were like, I think it could have been Jan. She was like, da, 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 da. Not that I'm comparing you to Jan, or it could have been Marcia. They were walking down the street, there's music playing, and then they all just started singing. So I don't mean to laugh. I was just laughing at the fact that you were like, wonderful music choices, guys. And it was literally your handbag.
Yeah, but I think that's a perfect example of me experiencing something myself and like connecting with that authentically and letting that joy come out, but then being judged by people.
Like the walls come up immediately.
Exactly, yeah.
Isn't that scary, the impact of, and I don't want to say like everyone in society, but the people that make it known to you very visibly or publicly, I don't like what you're doing, and why can't you just be, it's very scary to be yourself, I feel sometimes. Do you think so?
And that's the thing. I mean, like, we shouldn't really be focusing so much. And I've had so many kind of, particularly professionals, even in the last week or two, contacting me wanting to have consultations about masking, with their clients who are masking. Yeah. Like, why is the priority on these children on masking when the priority should be on creating a safe space for them so that they can mask? Because it's not safe to unmask for a lot of people. No,
it's not. And I'll often say, this is literally, I do or present a free webinar. I've only done one so far because I launched it there in October. But I literally present a free webinar for parents called Home is the Haven. Because we cannot control, and I don't mean to control in a negative sense, but I cannot make the variables pro-autism for my children when they leave the house. So the whole, I don't know, you can probably hear noise in the background of the podcast, but like all of my kids are home now. It's coming into bedtime. But like I try to make home as calm can be. I try to do that because because I'm more than yourself. I grew up in a world that, even though I wasn't, officially diagnosed as autistic or identified as autistic as a young person, but I still grew up in the world being traumatized by the way that my differences, to the point, I literally stopped going out or stopped going anywhere, or like I didn't want another person to say, why are you doing that? Or why are you moving your hands like that? Or can you not just, I remember I used to get into trouble in college where I would just keep clicking a pen all through the lectures, which is fair enough. There's probably about 500 people in the room and all you could do was clickety, click, click, click. And that was me.
You'd be mad.
Yeah, I probably would have. Yeah. But I suppose that I didn't realize I was stimming, but I knew that because it was very long, boring, excellent lectures, but a very text based, because it might have been, no offense to the lectures, like statute or constitution, very important to learn, obviously, because I was training as a solicitor later. But, it wasn't very visual, essentially. But yeah, I think, do you feel like it's okay to say, I want my children or I want even myself to unmask, but it still has to be a safe environment to do that.
But I feel like a lot of the parents I work with, like, isn't that the hardest part of the whole thing? It's like literally like walking away from societal expectations of how to parent and like parent the way you need to for your child. That's really, really hard.
There's a lot of shame put on parents.
And you really do have to kind of like basically reject a lot of what
and be brave.
Yeah, exactly. It's really, really hard.
Yeah, I find that now I suppose, actually, I often say it's great to be autistic because I'm socially unaware of probably a lot of what people may perceive of me or the way that I parent, because I'm just, my lens on the world is on my children and that they're growing up and feeling confident and never having a moment like I would have of doubting myself. But I definitely feel I notice it more obviously when I'm out and about with the kids that, because my kids move differently, they communicate differently, they're stimming, they're talking, they've different intonation or inflections in the way they speak, because I would say Max often sounds American. Connor uses speech device. I'll get a lot of people kind of looking at me, but then I wonder, is that because they might recognize, I don't mean this with ego, but they might recognize me from social media or for the work that I do, and then I have to keep saying to myself, they're not even looking at you. But then sometimes people will come up and say nice things, but then sometimes people will just, as that phrase, stare you out of it, and then I just want to leave. And even as a parent, then that's a good reminder, but it's a sad reminder to me that I shouldn't expect my children to be their 100% true selves out in the world, because I can't even do that as an adult, because it's a scary place. It's a jungle.
Yeah. And that's people, isn't it? It's
sad.
Scary. Yeah. Yeah.
Especially when you put it into the context of, say, all of the young people, and you, I'm sure, see this through your clinical practice, when you see all of the people that come in suffering, say, or like just self-doubt, self-unawareness, or just like even anxiety is like at the forefront of nearly everything when I'm supporting families recently. And it's nearly anxiety of the self, like I cannot be myself because I am not good enough.
But then I love this, because anxiety for me is such a trigger word for me, because is
apologies.
it anxiety or is it stress and overwhelm? Because there's a big difference, like anxiety is a perceived threat, whereas a lot of autistic people, it's not a perceived threat, it's an actual threat.
It is an actual, God, very valid point. It's literally like that whole piece of just existing in the world is overwhelming for many of our community members.
And it's the minute people label something as like anxiety, isn't all the accountability put back on that person to like...
interesting insight.
Anxiety, I suppose, let's look at why that's there as a coping mechanism for like, stress and overwhelm and deal with the...
Interesting.
Journal.
That's a very interesting insight, and actually a very valid one too, because then you're, instead of looking in at the person, you're going, but what about, it's like Dr. Bearden's autism plus the environment equals the outcome. So the autistic person, what's happening in that environment that's giving this outcome? Isn't that really interesting?
It is, because I mean, I've obviously so many referrals for
for sure.
Kids who are anxious. It's like, you teach them coping skills for anxiety. I'm like, no, no. Let's like figure out what's going on, that they're anxious or that they're stressed.
Let's look broadly around their world and look throughout the day, not just like sometimes I might get a call for like, oh, Mary's finding it difficult to transition to something in school, and I'm saying, well, can we look outside of that temporal context now and look more broadly at all of Mary's world, because this might be the only time in the day that Mary's showing what she's feeling internally, and now you're only seeing just a glimpse, because Mary's just in the classroom, and Mary mightn't be able in any which capacity to fully say or even physically show you how she's feeling. You're only seeing a moment in time. Let's look at all of the day, all of the evening, all of her life in a continuum of every aspect, if you can. Do you feel that would be more supportive than just saying...
Oh, and it's always the environment, always. It's never about changing that person or like, teaching them...
Do some breathing, you'll be fine.
You're literally conditioning them, aren't you? If you're teaching a child coping skills for anxiety, you're basically, again, you're invalidating their experience, number one. And then you're conditioning them to override their own nervous system and not be anxious, even though everything around them is telling them.
And to not trust their own nervous system either.
Exactly, yeah.
God, that's so... Ooh, I got goosebumps. So I knew I was going to love chatting to you, and I was saying to you, I was like, can't wait for a podcast. I'm just like, don't leave. We'll just keep talking. You're like, I need to go. Okay, so... Okay, I might move on from that. I'm trying to think of a different one. Okay, so I'm going to move to special interests. So people use different language for special interests. I would call it maybe passionate interest or focused interest. Have you a view on what the correct is? I know this will come up more frequently.
No. And I've spoken about this before. Like, I would call it a special interest.
Okay.
But it's when other people say special interest or use it in a very
weaponized,
kind of like specialising way, and it's individualized, then it's like a no. It just depends on the context it's used. But even I'm thinking of like one kid in particular that I would have seen before, and oh my God, he knew everything about dinosaurs. I actually used to sit there and take notes, like literally I was at a college lecture, and I would take notes. I would go home, I would watch the things he told me to watch. I would study the dinosaurs he told me to study. That was his area of expertise. If he was an adult and he was lecturing on this in college,
he'd be insightful.
Exactly. But then it's like, oh, it's just a special interest. And again, it takes away,
minimizes.
Yeah.
And invalidates it maybe a little bit.
Absolutely. It depends on the context, I suppose, it's used.
And do you feel, for you in your special interests, do you feel like, for me, I feel like they galvanize me to know who I am, and they really support me to feel confident in who I am and my knowledge bases, and as it just happens to be, autism is my passionate interest, and graphic design or around visual communication.
Yeah.
Do you feel for you that having those, I suppose, if you're happy to talk to, not only if you are special interests that you do have, but also how you feel they support you to be your true, authentic, autistic, neurodivergent self?
Well, I mean, it's probably like twofold, because like in one sense, the special interests keep my brain busy. I didn't have my
all the time.
I'm telling you, the intrusive thoughts all around, and like, you know, a lot more negative stuff will be going on in my head. So it's really important, I think, to have that special interest, that like positive thing to hook onto. But like, obviously my special interest is in like, you know, neurodiversity and like human rights and all that kind of stuff. And like, I'm after, you know, basically carving a career out of it now, which I absolutely love. So yeah, that is a massive special interest for me. And then like, just, I don't know what I even say special interest. See, I don't know, then is that the right, like, I would think that neurodivergence and like human rights and advocacy is a special interest of mine. But then I have other things, like I have my music, I have like my plants, I love sharks. Like, they bring me like joy. Like, I get like, if I suddenly see something, I'm just like, woo, yay, really excited.
Yeah, when you said sharks, I was like, ooh, that's very nice.
I didn't know that, like, you know, being interested in sharks is like a very autistic thing.
Really?
Yeah. I read that last year, and I was like, oh, that's me. I didn't realize, because I didn't have a stereotypical, you know, like special interest, like trains or whatever other things that would be stereotypical. But yeah, no, I think special interests are like really, really important, because it does bring you that joy and that satisfaction, and it keeps your brain busy.
And can I ask you, I wonder this often about myself, because if you were to look around, even behind my camera, say on this monitor, or even, you probably can't see it on the podcast, but most of my room is navy and it has a yellow door, but then it also has like rainbow curtains. I've like, here, I'll show you one, rainbow fidgets. I don't know, is it a special interest or not, but like rainbows for me it's like an autistic joy. Maybe it's a glimmer, but it definitely brings me a sense of peace, which is going to sound so bizarre. But like, do you feel like there's a visual element to special interests, or is that more of a stim? Where do you feel like could you categorize that or not?
When you were saying that to me, like instantly I thought like, well, that's just very stimulating for your brain, isn't it? Those contrasting colours and the bright colours. So like, again, it's feeding your brain that stimulation that you probably need. For
sure, yeah. So I do often wonder, I'm like, is that a special interest, or is that, but that's also me with, say, graphic design or visual supports. Yeah. It has to look, in my mind, perfect, but I have to always bring in the elements of the rainbow into everything I do. So you'll always see, literally, even on anything I do on social media, there's always at least 7 colours of the rainbow. Because for me, then it's like, I love in your background, you've like a gorgeous cloud with the rainbows and the lovely flag there as well. I'm just like, I love it already. The minute I saw it, I was like, interesting. Actually, really love the cloud. Did you make that yourself? It's like a cloud.
From someone who made it in Shannon years ago, yeah.
It's beautiful. A lovely skill to have. Okay, let me think. Is there something there? Okay, I don't want to keep you too long. I suppose around friendships and social dynamics, more specifically, I suppose, before you're identified, maybe, or maybe it's even as you've been identified, do you feel like the way you navigate friendships have changed, or do you feel like it's evolved, or do you feel like, here's an interesting question, do you feel like maybe you've lost friendships since you've been identified?
100%.
Yeah, I feel like I have as well, unfortunately. Or maybe not.
Yeah, sorry, go on.
No, I was saying maybe it's not, unfortunately, because if they were really my friends, then they wouldn't have, as I say, disappeared afterwards. But maybe it's a bipartisan. Maybe it's both of us, as in the two sides of the friendship.
I think when I was younger, I was so incredibly lucky that I grew up 5 minutes down the road from my best friend.
Oh,
since I was 5. Really, really lucky. Now she's living in Australia now, and I miss her because she's the only person who actually really knows me. But then even in secondary school, we had a little group. There were 6 of us, and
a little crowd.
A little crowd, and again, got on great, and probably all neurodivergent as well. But then, as an adult, I think the more I'm aligning to my authentic self, the more I am disconnecting from people who don't align with that. But that's a lot of people.
It is.
It's quite tricky.
And do you find, so one of the tricky things that I would have always kind of, and probably even will always will, deal with as an adult or as a young person with friendships was, I'm always triggered to blame myself when things go wrong. Or if someone isn't kind to me, I go, well, that's because, Amanda, you mightn't have understood what happened there correctly. Or, Amanda, that's probably you that's caused that now. So maybe be nicer to that person. Do you ever find that in times in your life that you've been like that, or no? That's just me.
It's not you. I'm fairly confident that I have a PDA profile. Fairly
interesting. Okay.
Yeah. So I can, if there's ever at all a shift in power dynamics in any relationship, I will.
You're gone.
I'm gone.
Yeah. Whereas I always give the second chance, the third chance, the fourth chance. And I often wonder then, is it a trauma response as well of having lived, because again, one of the interesting things that came out of that's, I suppose, when I went forward for that assessment, was that one of the things the psychologist said to me that I didn't take any significant relationship with me all throughout my life, that I kind of was like a nomad. I moved on from age group to age group and went off to college, didn't really have any significant friendships. Now again, I meet lots of people I went to secondary school with and they're always absolutely doty and lovely to me, but they wouldn't be someone I'd call up on the phone, or anyone from primary school, nobody really from primary school, nobody from secondary, probably no one from college, although I know a lot of them, because I chat to them on DMs on Instagram, have followed me now on social media, so I chat to them there, but wouldn't have been significant people where I'd be like, I'll keep your number and I'll ring you over the summer when I finish university. Did you ever have that, or no, or did you keep those friendships with you?
I kept,
You kept the secondary school group anyway, I assume, did you?
I did. Now, saying that, in the last year or two, I've completely disconnected a lot, but I think I'm going through some kind of I can't even think of that word.
Metamorphosis.
Yes, that's it.
First time I ever got a word right the first time around.
What is that? It starts with M. There's definitely some kind of shift happening, especially this year, but I think it might be hormones. You were talking about perimenopause.
Oh, perimenopause, yeah. It's we definitely maybe need to do a podcast another day just talking about the perimenopause and being neurodivergent, because it's great to see people talking about, we'll say, what's the correct language? I suppose menopause and perimenopause generally in society, and it's a great thing. Because I know when I was younger, I'm sure clearly my mother would have gone through the menopause, but I never ever remember anyone talking about menopause when I was growing up. Or if they were, maybe I was like, that's nothing to do with me, I'm only 20. It's definitely to do with me now because I'm 43. But yeah, I think that'd be a very interesting podcast to get a few voices on, just to see what everyone's perspectives are. Because I'm sure it must be, even from a sensory perspective, there has to be a huge element there of difference.
I think ADHD as well for me. It's after, when I was a teenager, I was I feel different periods of my life, I was more autistic or more ADHDs. The ADHD dominated my profile when I was a teenager, hormones, and it's definitely dominating my profile now at the moment as well in the last year. But I'm after retreating into myself a little bit and really hyper focusing on work, which is great because that's my special interest and I get joy out of it. But it's that all or nothing mentality that, it's just tricky trying to balance everything. So definitely this year with friendships, I'm sorry to everyone, I need to ring you back and text you back. But then that's activating my PDA a little bit. Because the more I know to do it,
the less you'll ever do it.
I literally can feel myself shutting down.
Yeah, if there's that heavy expectation for you to do the thing, they're like, I won't be doing that thing anytime soon. And it's not even negativity. You're like, you can't make me do it and I won't do it.
Yeah, but I want to do it. But now that I know that it's really important that I have to do it, I'm just you
can't do it.
And it's not like a fight. It's literally, it's a freeze response.
Yeah, you just can't. It's the pressure. The demanding or the expectation of the pressure. Okay, well, that's really interesting. I want to see if I have any other questions that can pop in here because we're nearly finished. Do you feel now as an adult, and even growing up, if you can reflect back, but if not even as an adult now, are there misconceptions specifically around ADHD and how people understand people that are ADHD, or do you feel like there's still like stigma attached to what that is?
Yeah, so my son actually just only got identified as ADHD a few weeks ago through CAMS, and I had to fight for that, accurate identification. And his phrase was, if it walks like a duck and it quacks like a duck and it looks like a duck, do we have to roast the duck? And I was like, no, but could we acknowledge that it is a duck? Like, what the hell does that even mean? So because it wasn't, really negatively impacting his life, he didn't want to give him the diagnosis, even though he's ADHD. Anyway, he got after Thankfully. Me. I ran after that. He got it, but definitely that kind of hyperactivity piece that people misunderstand. That hyperactivity can be internal. And I think that's the bit that people can't see. It's like they expect someone to be like, well, I know I'm externally and internally hyperactive. But it's those kids, like for me as an example, when I was a kid in school, I was the perfect kid. I would never do anything wrong. I would never say anything wrong. I would sit there and I was completely disassociated. I was daydreaming out the window. Like that was
from the teacher. They're like, oh, well, Gráinne's a fantastic student. And you're like, well, Gráinne wasn't really present for most of that, lesson miss. Sorry.
So it's definitely just like watching out for all those kids who are presenting, anxious and disconnected. And actually enough stimulation. And I think it's really, what it really is, it's about a brain that needs a lot of stimulation.
Do you know a word that I'm not a fan of, and I know it exists maybe for valid reasons, dysregulation. Sometimes I think it's nearly used as a weapon that, oh, Johnny can't do X because he's dysregulated. They'd find that too dysregulating. And then I'm like, but can I ask specifically, what do you mean by dysregulation? And more specifically, what has been put into place to support that dysregulation? What do you feel about that?
So I'm just after writing a whole thing about this. See, I have to stop. An idea will pop in my head. I'm going to write about this. And again, it's about reframing especially emotional regulation. And why can't we look at it as authentic expression?
Snap.
Emotional expression. Authentic emotional expression. And allowing that, like, we're very intense people, like ADHD or autistic people, we're very intense. We feel things very intensely and we're going to express that very intensely. So really, are we dysregulated, or are we dysregulating other people? Are we making other people feel uncomfortable by being authentically expressive?
Why is it always we're dysregulated? Why can't we look out, as you say, autism plus the environment equals the outcome? Why aren't we looking broadly and saying, but if we're saying the student or the human being is dysregulated, can we just look a little bit deeper to what does that actually mean?
Exactly, because if you're dysregulated, that is your nervous system has gone into fight flight, and that your nervous system has gone there for a reason. So it's not about shutting down that fight flight response, it's looking at what activated it.
It's looking under the surface and then looking forward and around and say, well, I wonder, I'm always like, well, that's interesting, but can I just ask you then? And then I start to ponder and wonder, okay, that's really interesting. Okay.
Sitting with the dysregulation as well. You have to be able to sit with it.
Oh, yeah.
With it and like allow yourself to be dysregulated and
work through it.
Yeah.
And then if there are strategies where a person might need support, they still need to learn what it feels like to be dysregulated, not in the sense of we must make sure everyone's dysregulated all the time, but to also understand in your body, what does it feel like? Actually, it's over, I won't move because I'll probably pull the headphones off me. Behind myself, I have an excellent book. Have you ever heard of Autism Level Up?
Yes. Oh my God. Yeah.
I'm like mega fan. I bought their book. Actually, there was the autism conference back in October, and I bought the book there off. I think. What'd you say?
That online?
No, I bought it in person because there was a book store. What's it called? Outside the Box Learning Resources it's an official, I suppose, academic bookseller, and I actually apparently bought the first print copy because they print the books there for their I suppose store. They said I bought the first print copy of the book in the store, in Ireland that day. I was like, I'm so delighted. But yeah, I find that a great resource to support around just even self-understanding of regulation or self-regulation.
I think that's really important because I would have had a lot of shame around myself because I'm, dysregulated a lot of the time because obviously I'm neurodivergent. My nervous system is very sensitive. But I think the minute it's about not trying to stop that dysregulation, but just noticing it and being curious and allowing yourself to be dysregulated. Instead of going, oh my God, I'm getting dysregulated, let's try and find something to stop
have
that.
some 5 breaths and you'll be grand. Yeah, but really looking as to, like, although the breathing obviously can be valid for some people, but let's look ahead to not just be like, just throw the 5 strategies that I have on the visual at this. Instead, look at, but what I nearly look at it like a profiler, look at the whole profile of the day. Let's look at all of the domains that we can definitely say could be a trigger. Can we look at all the domains? Can we look at, okay, we have strategies, we know that deep breathing can be helpful, that's good, but can we also get, before we need the deep breathing, look at the whole, as you said, the whole environment and structure up and support that person so they don't have to get to the point where they need to be putting in these other strategies. They can already maintain themselves and support themselves throughout the day. Would you think that's accurate?
Yeah, 100%. Definitely with, like, obviously sensory dysregulation, but even with emotional regulation, if you think about it like as waves, like it has to come and peak before it comes down. But if we keep interrupting it before it peaks, you're only completely like suppressing it and it's going to come out in a big, huge tidal wave.
It's just about, you're nearly agitating that emotional dysregulation because it's going to come and it's going to, as you say, almost like, excuse me, like a tsunami of overwhelm across, I suppose, not even that moment, but across their day and the days to follow afterwards.
And that's why the co-regulation is like so important, that other person can, like, like confidently and comfortably sit there with compassion and just sit with them through it, as opposed to trying to interrupt it. It's about witnessing it.
Yeah, I really like the piece where you said about that, like, you don't interrupt it, you support. No. Like, because what interrupting something that's going to happen anyway is not really, but you can go back a few steps before that moment came along and say, what could I as a support person have done there to support this person who's now at this point, and use that unfortunate tricky moment as a teaching lesson, not for the person that's gone through, but for ourselves as a support network. What could we have done differently that would have brought a different autism plus the environment equals that different outcome for that person, I suppose, really. So we're nearly coming to the end of time, so I'll ask you one more question if you don't mind. I suppose because we started off talking about our younger self, I suppose in relation to your younger self, if you could go back and speak to your younger self, what advice or encouragement would you offer your younger self about growing up, if you had been identified then, or even if you hadn't been identified as autistic, ADHD, or anything, if you were talking to your younger self now, what might you have said if you were there to look back and support?
Really hard, because I think everything I went through
helped you in a way.
I had to go through all that and figure it out myself. So by telling myself, my younger self, something that would have like stripped that opportunity away.
That learning opportunity.
Yeah, myself. But I suppose obviously the self-compassion piece is huge. And I think, like, identity and self-understanding and community are everything.
Yeah, that's actually a very powerful statement. Okay, as a final question, I know I didn't kind of tell you I was going to ask you this, but I think it might be useful. If there's an autistic person questioning, could they be autistic? If there's a parent of a child wondering about, should I label, and I wouldn't really use that language, but sometimes people do, should I be labeling my child as autistic? Or should I go forward I've been questioning, am I autistic? Should I go for that assessment? What would be a statement that you would offer to them, say, as reassurance as to why it's important to believe your own, as a parent, to believe maybe your own feelings about your child, being as you did, you trusted in your own gut instinct and you moved forward to support your son, and again later to support your daughter. Is there something, if I was a parent now or a person questioning I might be autistic, is there anything that you would like them to hear from you, I suppose, as the play therapist, or just as yourself as Gráinne Warren, the neurodivergent person?
It's so important to get that identified. Like, you're opening up a whole avenue of self-realization, self-understanding, self-compassion, the community and the connection piece. It's really, really important. But the one thing is that if you're going about any kind of assessment, please go to someone who's neuroaffirming, because I've seen so many kids and parents in here who have been traumatized by going to assessments and being told that they're disordered, using all the wrong language.
Oh gosh.
Oh, it's really heartbreaking. It's heartbreaking.
Yeah. So and really, that's
yeah. Sorry, go on.
Oh no, sorry. That's me being totally autistic talking over you. I do apologise. But I think that's why I think we're both like, actually, I think it was the ADHD part of you, Amanda. I suppose for me, I think about when I went for that assessment, it was so positive. And one of the things that I apparently did, I didn't even recognise, I probably have done it multiple times on all the podcasts, is that apparently I say sorry all the time. And
yeah, I was like that before.
Really? Yeah. So I didn't know that I did, but I went for one of the appointments, and I did this during the pandemic. So my assessments happened online. One of the appointments that I had, I suppose the person that assessed me was saying, do you know that you say sorry all the time? And I was saying, oh, sorry, I don't mean to. He's like, he said this point, I said sorry about 50 times. I was like, oh, sorry. He's like 51. I was like, oh, terribly sorry. He's like 52. He's like, you don't need to apologize for being you. Who you are is just perfect. You don't need to be any other way other than who you are. And you don't need to ever feel like you should apologize. Because I was saying I talk too fast. He's like, you don't talk too fast. You talk perfectly the way that you talk. And I just remember for myself thinking, am I so lucky that I chose that person to go to for my assessment? Because I've walked away now not worrying about myself so much anymore, and now saying, well, I'm just going to be myself. I can't be anything else other than myself. So that's what I find useful.
No, it's absolutely, and this, saying I was completely like that before. Like every second word out of my mouth would have been an apology. Not anymore. It's been replaced with quite a lot of defiance, to be honest with you. It's the other side of it. But even I work with a lot of kids who do that.
Really?
Oh God, yeah. And it's so heartbreaking because obviously, like, I'm like, I was like that as well. I remember what it was like to be like just sorry for everything. Basically, it's definitely like a fawning response because it's like you don't want to activate another person, so you're like apologizing before they're activated.
Literally.
Yeah, but it's interesting because, like, if I remember people used to say to me as well, like, you're always saying sorry. What's that about? And it used to really annoy me. Like, it used to actually really like agitate me because I couldn't help it.
You didn't even know you were doing it because you've always done it. So it's like breathing. You just naturally comes out of your mouth because for whatever reason, unfortunately, you've had those experiences where it was either expected of you or you're meant to feel a certain way where you were like, I better just apologize. Yeah.
I find even with the young people I work with, like the more self-empowered they are, the less that happens and it just kind of dwindles away.
Oh, well, I'm really glad. Well, can I just say, as an autistic person, as a parent to autistic children, I'm so glad that incredible therapists such as yourself, Miss Gráinne Warren, that you exist in the world. And thank you so, so much for coming on the podcast. I know you're so incredibly busy. You're a busy mom of 3. You're an incredibly busy professional, absolutely obsessed with your social media, and cannot wait to download your workbook. And at the end of this podcast, the description section, I'm going to put in all the links for Gráinne, her social media, and then I suppose just a huge thanks for myself that I want to say. It's been actually so much fun. I'll be thinking about that song later of you walking around the store singing Islands in the Street. Sorry, I don't get to laugh.
Divergent moments like that, I could talk for hours about it. But
it's a little bit like, I just keep thinking the Brady Bunch. I might find a clip later and send it to you. They were definitely, a lot of that family were definitely neurodivergent.
I watched it a few weeks ago. Like, I actually watch it. I love it that much. They're so neurodivergent.
I might have watched that later on. I'm a devil for TikTok at night time because it stops my mind being so busy with academia. So I look at random TikTok.
I've never looked at TikTok yet.
Oh my God, you'll just never come off the phone because if you're ADHD, I watch it. This is a terrible and not a recommendation, but to slow down my mind at night time, to shut down for sleep, I watch TikToks for a while and then I end up literally, when the phone hits my face, I know I'm about to go to sleep. So I'm not a sleep recommendation for anyone to have. But listen, Gráinne, I'll leave you because I know we're nearly on the hour. But listen, thank you so much for coming on. We'll definitely have to do it again if you have the availability. I'd be delighted to have you on again. So listen, thank you. You're an absolute gem. So thank you. And thank you to everyone for listening. I'm sure we'll have another guest next week or you might be hearing from myself. We won't know till we listen in again. So thank you. Bye.